Right, so here's the thing, like if you post videos on YouTube or if you do anything creative or pretty much most things, if you just live, really, if you just live in this world, at some point somebody's going to give you advice that you didn't ask for. And for me, it's just like, why? Why do that? Because here's the thing, like I get that it's well-intentioned, or at least I assume it's well-intentioned. But at the same time, it's like there's so many things that haven't happened before the advice was given. And because these things haven't happened, more often than not, the advice given is pretty useless. Because before you give advice, you need to know, do they want your advice? Do they need your advice? Are they asking for your advice? Is it necessary? You also need to know what exactly they're trying to achieve. Because I feel like a lot of times people just say stuff assuming that you're trying to do this thing, when it could be that you're trying to do something completely different. So they're giving you advice based on what they assume you're trying to do rather than what you're actually trying to do. So you need to know what exactly are their goals, what they're trying to achieve. And you also need to know what have they already done. Because the advice you're giving could be things that they've already tried. And in which case it's like, what was the point of that? But you really need to know, do they want your advice? What type of advice they're looking for? Like what their goals are, so you can tailor your advice towards that. And you know, what they tried before. If you hear a weird noise, it's my windscreen wipers. It's raining right now, so my windscreen is kind of going up. That's like an automatic thing. Anyway, it kind of goes back to the video I did earlier where I was saying about listening. You know, oftentimes when people are talking, we're not necessarily listening to what they're saying. We're just waiting for our turn to speak. So we pick out a few words here and there. We make an assumption of what they're talking about. And then we have all these things in our head about what we want to say. So by the time we finally speak, it's like we're saying a bunch of stuff, but we haven't actually responded to what they were saying because we're not fully paying attention. And I remember like one time, I used to do a lot of photography back in the day, and I mentioned it to this guy at some event. I can't remember, it was a party or event or some kind of gathering anyway, and mentioned that I do photography, and immediately he just went into all these things about, oh, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, here's what you gotta do. And I'm kind of like, well, one, I've tried some of those things. Two, some of the things I mentioned, I was kind of like, that doesn't seem like it applies to me. But at the end of him saying all this stuff, it was like, I can't remember exactly how it was, if he mentioned it or I asked, I don't remember the exact order of things right now. It was a long time ago, but at some point it basically came up that he hasn't done any photography at all, and basically every advice he was giving me was just stuff that he's heard. So it's like, okay, so you're trying to give me advice on something that I'm doing when you haven't done it and you just heard a bunch of stuff. You know what I mean? And it's not to say that, oh, that means everything you say is going to be completely useless. It just means that you might want to check a few things first. You know, because a lot of times people like I say, I used YouTube in the beginning because this happens when you post videos on YouTube. People are like, oh, this is what you should do. You should do this. You should do. And look, I know it's well intentioned, but at the same time, it's like, you don't know what I've already done. You don't know what I'm trying to do. And you don't know if I even want your advice. So it's just like, you have a very high chance, a very high possibility of just wasting your time. If you really want to give somebody advice on something, if you're not sure if they want your advice, just ask. Is it okay if I give you advice on something? Would you like some advice on something? You know, just ask. You can do that. And if they say no, all right, cool, leave it there. If they say, actually, yeah, I would like some advice. Then the next thing is, what are your goals? What are you trying to do? Because if you don't know what they're trying to do, you might be just giving advice on something that doesn't actually apply to them. So what are your goals? What are you trying to do? And then what have you already done? What are the things that you've already tried? Because you don't be giving advice to somebody on things they've already done, because again, you're just wasting your time at this point. So before you give advice, check that they want your advice, check what their goals are, what they're trying to achieve, so you can tailor your advice according to what they actually need, and then check what they've already done, so you're not just telling them stuff that they've already done, and then you're not really going anywhere. So yeah, that's my video today. It's not that giving advice is bad, but maybe check a few things before you give the advice. All right, peace. Oh, and don't be giving advice on things you know nothing about, because that's just dumb.